IMA Dombivli has been a forerunner in facing it head on in this pandemic and helping KDMC in all the best possible way. Unless you are a managing committee member or a close friend of our committee members, you cannot imagine the way our president, secretary, and treasurer have done their best to guide, help, and fight for our branch members. There is a great respect for Dr. Mangesh Pate and Dr. Archana Pate for being there, for their strong support, as well as flag bearers of our IMA branch. In spite of everything, they still want to do the best for our branch and our members as well as for our society. Today, we are lucky to have plasma convalescent therapy available for our patients. It's the fruit of their efforts. I personally would like to thank all the managing committee members for their time, effort, and dedication. Today, it's a great pleasure to invite Dr. Swarupa Bhagwat as a speaker for today's webinar. I would like to invite Nirmal Thakur and Dr. Aparna Bagul as our moderators. Let me introduce our moderators. Dr. Nirmal Thakur, he is a critical care consultant presently working in SRV Mamta Hospital. He has worked as an associate consultant in critical care at Hinduja Hospital, Mahim, and as a senior ICU resident and junior intensivist at Bombay Hospital. Dr. Aparna, she is a consultant in transfusion medicine and pathology. She is an undergraduate from Rajiv Gandhi Medical College and postgraduate from KJ Somaya Medical College. She has been working in plasma diagnostic laboratories and blood banks since the last 13 years. Now, I request Dr. Aparna to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon, friends. It's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Swarupa Bhagwat. Dr. Swarupa Bhagwat is Associate Professor in the Department of Transfusion Medicine at St. GS Medical College and KM Hospital. She has done her MBBS and MD Pathology from St. GS Medical College. She is a faculty at St. GS Medical College since the year 2005. She is a MUHS approved postgraduate teacher for transfusion medicine. She is also an assistant editor for the Asian Journal of Transfusion Science. Currently, she is a co-investigator in the currently ongoing plasma trial, which is being conducted at GS Medical College and KM Hospital. I now request Dr. Swarupa Bhagwat to enlighten us with her talk. Over to Swarupa, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Aparna, for that. Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that introduction. And at the outset, I would like to thank IMA Dombivli for giving me this wonderful opportunity to interact with everyone. And congratulations on the great noble initiative that you have taken to save lives of COVID patients by opening this plasma bank. So once again, I congratulate and begin my talk here today. Basically, as Dr. Aparna has introduced, that I am co-investigator in one of the clinical trials. So those trials are going on, and still we are not exposed to. So we are basically using the plasma whichever we have collected in trials. We are not issuing plasma to other patients outside. So I would like to share all of you to share your experiences about plasma. Next. Yeah. So at the outset, I would wish Happy Teachers' Day to all of us. We are all teachers and we will learn from each other. It is not that because I am in a medical college, I am a teacher. That's what I said, that we all will share our experiences, because whatever we have experiences over last 5 to 6 months in this COVID, but your experience, because you are working in community, you are treating patients. So all that experience will really enrich my knowledge also. So I would request in the discussion later on after the topic to share all your latest guidelines and whatever additional knowledge with me also, so that even I would like to have that. So the topic today, about ins and outs of convalescent plasma, we'll mainly go through all these points. That is, we will introduce what convalescent plasma actually is, its history, then propose mechanism of action, how it is supposed to work. Donation of convalescent plasma, how the donors are recruited, what is their eligibility criteria, collection of this convalescent plasma, how it is actually preserved, how it is transfused, our experience with the clinical trials, whatever we are doing at KEM Hospital, and the results of other clinical trials. So all this we will discuss today. So convalescence, as we are all aware, we have learned this terminology during our, right from our MBBS days, that it is regaining strength after sickness or some weakness. So this convalescent plasma is immune plasma, which is collected from a patient who had previously been infected with a particular disease, especially the infection, and he has developed those antibodies. So it is a way of passing that artificial immunity, passive immunity, from one person to the other who is infected with the disease, but still not have developed antibodies to fight that particular infection. So it is taken from one patient who has developed antibodies to another person who has not yet developed those antibodies. So it is one of the proposed treatments for COVID-19. It is not a new concept, of course, because there have been so many pandemics, epidemics, which have affected the entire world and different regions of the world. And this convalescent plasma therapy has been tried right from 1800. Just imagine 1892, when diphtheria infection was rampant. That time, it was taken from animals, that serum, and that was used as anti-diphtheria serum. Later on, Spanish flu influenza pandemic, which struck the world in 1918, and that created havoc. That time, this convalescent plasma was also used as this potential therapy for that. Again, it has been used, and especially majority of these are very similar viruses. They cause respiratory problems, and finally, respiratory failure is the main pathogenesis, means the main cause of mortality. By that, so dangerous. So that is how in all these plasma, various infections, this plasma therapy has been tried, and especially Ebola. It had given mixed results, but very promising results. So now, this emergence of COVID-19 pandemic, this is again time to reassess the usefulness of this plasma, convalescent plasma therapy, and whether we can fight this coronavirus, which has really caused havoc again throughout the world and affected us on all fronts. So in COVID, it can range from, the clinical spectrum can range from asymptomatic to severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is the main cause of death. And there are various mechanisms, means the basic pathogenesis, how it affects the lungs, respiratory system, how it interacts with the, means binds to the receptor, how it causes a release of virions, RNA replication, and when virions are released, there is cytokine storm, all that. And so at each level, there may be different various drugs which are available, right from hydroxychloroquine, antivirals, and this plasma therapy. So in this emerging infection, all therapeutic options are in this. There are many options, as I told you, various drugs which are available, but each drug may be effective, may not be effective. There are still various controversies or various discussions about that, but each treatment or whichever drug or treatment therapeutic modality which is available should be discussed and should be used ethically and scientifically, whatever is available. So what is the mechanism of action? As all of us know that it is because of transfer of passive antibodies, passive transfer of antibodies from one individual to the other. So this is how, this is a very simple picture, and this is very basic actually. I did not again elaborate on this, but from an individual donor who has recovered from COVID-19, from his blood, apheresis is performed, and plasma is taken out, which contains antibodies, and these antibodies then are passed on to the patient. And ABO incompatible plasma, of course. So when we talk about transferring passive immunity, there are two ways of doing it. One is immunoglobulin preparation, and the other is convalescent plasma. So we will discuss about immunoglobulin preparations also towards the end of the lecture. Like this is just similar to when there is a case of hemophilia A. We transfuse cryoprecipitate, which is derived from human plasma. Finally, from fresh frozen plasma, we take out that cryoprecipitate And on the other hand, there is factor VIII concentrate, which is prepared from that plasma itself, but again by fractionation. So something like that. Not exactly, but that same analogy can be applied here. We will discuss about immunoglobulin preparations towards the end, but convalescent plasma we will be discussing today. And especially these treatment modalities are going to be helpful, and there are various trials going on, studies going on, especially when there are no specific treatments that this particular disease, okay, give this drug and it will cure. It is not like that, and even vaccines are not available still and are under trial. And like how long it will go on, we are wondering that somewhere it has to stop, somewhere the patient needs to be cured. So convalescent plasma can be really a promising option for that. So it is neutralizing antibodies who have not been previously exposed or vaccinated. So when we consider the morphology of this particular virus, there are structural proteins, and out of those 4 proteins, 2 are mainly important. One is spike protein and the other is nucleocapsid. So antibodies to these particular proteins, I will show you the picture. So these are the spike proteins here, which are marked, and there are nucleocapsid proteins. So these spike proteins are the ones which play a role in that respiratory lung involvement when they bind to SE receptors, and there are receptor binding domains, and then they affect respiratory cells and even gastrointestinal cells, and that is how they cause symptoms. So there has to be something in the treatment modality which that antibody should be against that spike protein, which is the main culprit which causes all these problems. Others are envelope proteins and membrane proteins. Their role exactly is not very clear, but spike proteins and nucleocapsid proteins are the ones against which the antibodies which are developed can play really a role, especially the spike protein. This is another one which is also notorious because it interacts with the viral nucleic acid RNA and then contributes to functional virions assembly, and later on it can lead to cytokine storm. So basically these are the ones, these proteins against which the antibodies are developed, and these antibodies can be tested in an individual by ELISA technique or functional assays. There may be IgM antibodies, IgG antibodies. So different types of combinations of antibodies can be present in a person when he gets infected. So this is Kavach ELISA kit, which is approved by SCMR, whereby by ELISA technique we can detect these antibodies, and others are in live culture, which are the neutralizing antibodies, which are performed at NIV Pune, National Institute of Virology, Pune only, where it requires live virus. So IgM antibodies start appearing approximately 1 week after the infection, within 1 week, and they continue to increase over next 2 weeks. Later on, as we know, IgG response always comes later after that. So these antibodies, when they are there in a person and when they're given to the other patient, like through plasma therapy, they will bind to that virus in the person's body, in the patient's recipient's body, it will get neutralized. And so, because especially that anti-RBD receptor binding domain or anti-S antibodies, because they will block that anti-RBD, particular those domains, they cannot attach to the respiratory epithelium, as I had shown in that picture earlier, and that's how it will prevent their entry into the cells. So further damage will be prevented. It also causes antibody-dependent phagocytosis or antibody-dependent cellular toxicity, so that virus is cleared also from the circulation and further replication is prevented. Once that replication is prevented, it will prevent cytokine storm, which is the main cause of mortality, and that it can lead to very serious complications and consequences. So it would prevent replication. So this is how those antibodies which are transferred from one person to the other can really help the other individual. So it has the potential to prevent illness, and it will shorten the duration of stay in the hospital and severity of illness. So especially those individuals who have been very, very sick, a particular person who has got very sick, there are high chances that he will have very high titer of antibodies or high concentration of antibodies. And when such individual recovers, his antibodies, he can donate his plasma, and that is more likely to have higher titers of antibodies. But still, there are many, as I told you, there are trials, hundreds and thousands of trials going on all over the world. And we may or may not get concrete answers to all the questions which are asked. There are still many questions still remain. So we need to keep that in mind. and other factors also. It is not only it carries antibodies, but it also carries other factors also, which can restore endothelium glycocalyx, which will prevent thrombotic complications or prevent vascular leakage. So all those factors which are present in an individual's plasma can be given to the other person, and it will help in the recovery of the other person. So again, serial monitoring. Now today itself, I read in one of the Marathi newspapers, I think Lok Satta, somewhere it was mentioned that in Pune they have conducted one survey in which those antibodies which were earlier there have immediately disappeared. They have surveyed some 1,800 people who have recovered from COVID, and they have tested their antibodies, and earlier they were there, and within I think 15 days again those have disappeared. So again, that is very variable. Whatever we say is again, every individual's response may be different. And that's why serial monitoring of titers may be required. So again, qualification of donors based on the tests, which are, many tests are still under validation. ELISA and neutralizing antibody assays are still, neutralizing antibody assays are done only at NIV Pune. So they are not really widely available because live virus is required. And so that problem also is there. ELISA tests, whether they are validated. They need to be validated by each laboratory. So all those factors are still creating obstacles somewhere, but we are still proud that we are overcoming it. We are doing our best and using this plasma as a treatment modality. And that is the initiative which IIMA Dombivli also has taken, and that is really wonderful. So with all these problems, still, this is a treatment which is provided by people who have been infected. And so it can be available really immediately. This particular, that we don't have to wait for production of immunoglobulins, where which are to be manufactured by certain techniques like fractionation or chromatography. Here that person can be called, he can donate his plasma, and it can be made easily available. So it is a human product. Secondly, resource limited centers or resource limited countries where cost and where many people are under poverty line, this is really cost effective. Everyone cannot go for immunoglobulins. And if it is infused within proper times, it can prevent progression to severe stage of disease. Now, donation of convalescent plasma. Once we have seen the mechanism, now actual donation of this plasma, which will contain various steps like donor recruitment. First of all, that is one thing which is very, very challenging. Donor eligibility and collection of plasma. And then it's preservation and then issue for the patients. And this has to be done by licensed blood centers, and standard operating procedures should be laid down for each. Many of the blood banks now, they have standard operating procedures because everything is under drug control, FDA. So all operating procedures are already laid down. So here also clear-cut SOPs should be laid down so that it is very easy for us to follow everything and everything falls in place. Now, donor recruitment is one problem which can really be challenging because what probably you also might have faced it, that it is a pandemic situation and many individuals are already recovering from infection. There is always fear that I will get infected. There is mobility is less, and people have that experience that many times when we contact those donors, they don't want to come back to again that same environment from where they have recovered, or they don't want to relive that same thing that they have gone through. Some are really motivated because they want to, because they have suffered, they want to do something for the society. That is on one side. Another thing, there is always fear in their mind that again going back to the hospital, again probably I may catch infection, or again those memories. So that's why that is one category. So there are both categories. It is not that always donors, they are reluctant to come, but that also we have to keep in mind that sometimes we may have to really motivate them very well, and that is a skill. So depending on the region and type of healthcare system, the approaches to donor recruitment will vary. Now, what we have done, that also I will share for recruitment of donors for our plasma trial. We are not gone into, as at the outset itself, I told you that we are not giving plasma out of the clinical trial yet, but we have whatever our experiences as per the trial, I would like to share. So donor self-identification. They hear that, okay, there is something called plasma and I have recovered, so I should go. So donors themselves, there is self-identification, self-awareness, and they go themselves and donate. sometimes clinicians refer. For example, if a particular person is getting recovered from COVID, he's been discharged from the hospital, the clinicians can counsel him about this plasma therapy. Then he can come back after 28 days and he can get himself tested and he can come back and donate. That is the second thing. Then social media campaigns. Obviously through social media, obviously it is there about plasma donation. A lot of material has been circulated and it has been, there has been campaign through NGOs and then news channels, media. Then review and analysis of patient or public health registries. So basically we have got these two approaches. We have experienced these two approaches. First of all, donor self-identification. Here, basically through one of those social organizations, the donors have come because there was no Ganpati this time. Many of those Lal Bagh Raja and all those, they did not keep Ganpati. So there were campaigns about this plasma donation. And in that particular area near KEM where Lal Bagh is, so they came down and they themselves approached that Lal Bagh Raja, those donors. Some additional campaign must have been there from the organizers, but they themselves were motivated, they came down. That is one thing. And even social media also, they must have been campaign. Second thing, patient or public health registries. That was very convenient for us and we were at advantage because ours being a public hospital, municipal corporation hospital, Mumbai BMC corporation. So we had easy access to these registries because the patients were admitted in our hospital. We just took our administrator's consent and additional municipal commissioner's consent for getting access. So because it is within the government sector and within the same hospital, we could get easy access. Otherwise, the problems of privacy and confidentiality are always there, ethical issues. The other NGOs, sometimes they try to contact us that they want to access to these registries, which we cannot give them because this is only for the government sector. So these two where we really banked on and we got good response for the plasma trials. Then another is family and friends of a patient with COVID-19. Because their patient is admitted, they want to donate plasma for that particular individual. But that is ethically discouraged because it is similar to blood donation. Blood donation also, if a particular individual is my relative and my patient needs blood and they know each other, the patient and the donor know each other, then it becomes a problem unless and until it is a very, very rare blood group. So same way here, in case of plasma donation, suppose for thalassemia now, I think Dr. Aparna is from blood bank and many of you must be there part of it. So like for example, for O negative, there is O negative patient and O negative blood is required and it is not available. So we blood bank contacts volunteer, he comes, but he doesn't know the patient's identity and patient doesn't know who has donated for him. But it is in directed donation, patient knows because his father's friend has donated. So, and that blood is kept reserved for that individual. But then under social pressure, that person will hide his history because he cannot say that he had history of exposure or he had high risk behavior and there is risk of transfusion transmissible diseases. So under pressure, he donates. And then there is the risk of transfusion transmissible diseases. That's why directed donations for plasma also are usually discouraged. So we don't go for this option. And another ethical concern is about equitable distribution. This particular person has donated for his patient, so it will remain for that patient. And if it is out of stock, plasma is less shortage, some other patient who is serious and critical, in that plasma is required, but we cannot give because that is reserved for this person. So again, ethical concerns when a particular person wants plasma, needs plasma, we cannot give because that has been reserved and who is not going to need. So those such things come up. And one more important thing is healthcare workers are a useful source because they themselves are working in healthcare area, they are exposed to COVID. Many of us are positive. Sorry. And many are they are hospital based. And this also was one more thing where we got donors, our own resident doctors. Many of them came forward and they donated plasma. So there are donor selection criteria. These are the criteria all of you are aware. And when nulliparous female donors are taken, that also we will discuss. In female donors, multiparous or female donors cannot be taken, only nulliparous female or otherwise it should be male. So these criteria have been shown also in earlier video, inauguration video. So how much time duration, there should be symptoms, and there should be complete resolution of symptoms, or the X-ray 28 days after that. But if it is within 28 days, but 14 days after, ideally it should be 28 days after complete resolution of symptoms, so that person can donate his plasma. But if he wants to donate before 28 days are over, but 14 days are after 14 days, so between those 14 and 28 days of resolution of symptoms, then in that case, there should be that resolution of infection needs to be confirmed by non-reactive nucleic acid test, again by RT-PCR, on 2 nasopharyngeal swabs which have been collected 24 hours apart. So that is additional criteria, because that is 14 to 28 days, we are not sure whether there is complete resolution of infection. So again, you need to perform RT-PCR and confirm that the person has got rid of that infection. So the individuals fulfilling the above criteria, sometimes we organize these plasma camps. For example, that as I told you, Lal Bagh Se Raja, there were camps all throughout the month of August till 31st August. All that Ganpati period and everything on. Even on the day of Ganpati, there was like a lot of good response. People came because there was no Ganpati. They came and did this noble job. So they came, and when they come there, we take the history there itself, collect their blood samples, we process, and then later on we inform them that they're eligible to donate and they come down. They should come down to blood bank. Otherwise, a person can walk in to blood bank. We will take complete history and blood collection that I will show you. So apart from the additional criteria which were there for donation of plasma, other donor eligibility criteria for whole blood donation stand, because those are basic criteria for blood donation as per Drugs and Cosmetics Act and rules of 1945, which have been amended recently in March 2020. So as per those criteria remain. This is the criteria of various infectious diseases, jaundice, typhoid, is that. Above all, there are these criteria that RT-PCR should be negative between 14 and 28 days, or complete resolution of symptoms. Those are additional for plasma donation. So once all these eligibility, so this is donor screening, and screening like basic history and brief physical examination, like pulse, blood pressure, their weight is taken. Donors who are not fit to donate blood will be deferred, and if it is temporary period of deferral, they will be only for that temporary period they can be deferred. And donors who have COVID diagnosis more than 4 months also will be excluded, because after 4 months it is likely that the antibodies will really fall and their plasma will not be of any use. It will not contain antibodies anymore. That is how we predict that probably the antibodies remain for maximum 4 months. They may disappear much earlier also, but maximum 4 months they remain. And after 4 months, if a person comes to donate that he had got COVID 4 months back, then these donors are discouraged from donating, because that plasma may not be of any use to the patient, because it will no more contain antibody level in that donor would have gone down by that time. So after that, one additional thing which is not there in blood donation, we collect blood samples. Before we proceed further for collection of plasma, we test patients, that donors, certain tests, biochemical and serological tests are performed on the donor. So for that, when we see that the donor is fit, his history and other like COVID history, as well as other parameters which are, or other criteria which are required for blood donation, normal blood donation also, is fit to donate plasma, then immediately we go for this collection, blood collection. So we perform basic ABO grouping is must, and antibody screening is performed. Something called antibody screening, which we usually is performed in the blood banks. So to detect whether there are any other antibodies, which are red cell antibodies. So here, this is the negative antibody, the red cells are settled, and this is the agglutination which is seen. And this person is positive for antibody screen. So if he is containing some antibodies, these are not COVID antibodies. These are antibodies to red cells. Okay, so red cell antibodies to some antigens of the red cells like L antigens or Duffy, all those blood group systems apart from ABO. So if he's having those antibodies and you are collecting that 200 ml of plasma, it will contain red cell antibodies also, right? So those antibodies will be going to patient's body And those antibodies can cause hemolysis in the recipient, because these are red cell antibodies. COVID antibodies are different. These are antibodies to red cells which are present in the person's plasma, donor's plasma. And those antibodies can, when they will bind to red cells of the recipient from this plasma, and they can cause hemolysis. So if any of these tests are positive, we should not take such donor. So this is one, and this is called antibody screen. Complete blood count, of course, on the we have hemoglobin, platelet count, and leukocyte. All CBC parameters should be within normal. And here, screening for infectious diseases needs to be performed. Usually on blood, we perform it within 24 hours after the donor has donated. Right? Today he donates blood. His blood is kept in quarantine. Then we perform those HIV and everything, all those tests, probably next day or same day evening. And then we decide whether to take this particular blood in stock. If it is negative, then we use that blood for transfusion. But here we are doing all these tests before the donor donates. Because once he donates, after that, if any of these tests come positive, we have to throw away that whole plasma bag, which is not really cost effective. It will cause a lot of wastage also. So it's better that everything is done before that, and the donor, everything is negative, then we can call that donor. And because it is plasma, we need to check proteins also. So total serum proteins also need to be checked as per Drugs and Cosmetics Act. So these tests are performed, and IgM and IgG antibodies are checked. Person should be negative for IgM because that will indicate active infection. If it is, he is positive for IgG, he should be taken. This is a rapid test for IgG, which is there as per the, this basically majority of these things I'm showing as per the trial requirement where we are doing that clinical trial. This is as per the trial criteria, whatever. Apart from that, if any additional things you want to share, definitely you are welcome. So, depending on the availability, this titration of antibodies, it is not mandatory part for the clinical trial. And because these trials, basically these neutralizing antibodies are performed at NIV Pune. So these samples, donor samples, we usually preserve at below -80, and later on we are going to send them to NIV. One trial is already finished, the other one is going on. So we are preserving those donor samples below -80, and we will send them to NIV Pune. But we does not preclude the use of this plasma for transfusion. We still have to go ahead and do it. That means do the transfusion. So collection, as even FDA has approved, it is by apheresis. FDA has approved or given permission for procedure by apheresis. So majority of you are aware what apheresis is. It is only collection of one particular component from the individual, and the rest of the components are sent back to the donor's body. So we can collect only plasma, or we can collect only platelets, and plasma and red cells can go back to the donor. So we get only platelets. Here we collect only plasma in these individuals because plasma is the one which contains antibodies which will be transfused. And another option is separation of plasma from whole blood donation. That was another option, and it is very debatable. There are lots of debates going on this because the criteria for whole blood donation, right? Suppose I want to donate blood for a thalassemia child, or I want to just do whole blood donation. So anyway, the criteria is after 28 days. If I have recovered from COVID 28 days before, I can still donate blood also, whole blood. So maybe I can donate blood and plasma can be separated, and that plasma can be used as COVID plasma because it is similar, like apheresis. But there are differences, and FDA has currently given permission for apheresis plasma. But because there are debates going on about whole blood donation, there are some certain things which we need to consider. We cannot completely discard this whole blood donation because everyone may not have apheresis instrument. There may be like in some smaller districts, blood banks, they may not be having, even government blood banks, they may not be having all these facilities. So probably they can, but try with whole blood donation, but FDA usually discourages because there are certain reasons. Because from apheresis, this is apheresis machine, we have this Haemonetics MCS Plus machine, and we can collect 2 units, means 500 ml at a time plasma from the donor. While in apheresis, whole blood donation, you cannot collect 500 ml. Maximum only one dose, maybe 180 to 200 ml, you can collect 180 ml from 350 bag, 350 ml bag. So only one dose can be collected. Here you can use 2 units from one donor. So greater yield is there. Donor can more frequently donate. After 15 days also he can come back and donate. But whole blood donation, 3 months. The donation between period. So for 3 months you cannot take that donor back for donation. After 3 months only. So you are losing on that donor. Because that period he cannot donate now. For 3 months gap, he cannot donate. So you are losing out. Even if he wants to donate plasma, he cannot donate. For donor safety, because hemoglobin red cells are going back to that individual, it will not make him anemic. But whole blood donation, you are removing red cells also. So, but still, we have to keep in mind that the whole blood donation, that particular thing also, because in middle income or even lower income countries, maybe poorer countries than India also, what they will do, they may not have even apheresis equipment, so they may go for this whole blood plasma separated from whole blood. So donor identification number and collected plasma is divided into smaller packs because each dose is considered 200 ml. So one dose is 500 ml, we consider separate out, and some amount of extra plasma we keep it for further testing, sending to NIV Pune or any other further test which we want to perform, and it should be kept frozen like FFP only. Now transfusion of plasma. So there are basically it is combined with other disease specific and supportive treatment, convalescent plasma. Many times it is like combined with it, and it is advisable that you should participate in clinical trial because those trials are going on. Results are not yet clear. The trials are assessing efficacy and safety in moderate diseases, moderate COVID and severe COVID. There are 2 separate trials which are going on. So if enrollment in that particular trial is not possible, but at least if you are treating a particular individual with COVID plasma outside the trial, is still acceptable, but then in that case, you should monitor the patient so that it will help in further management or further some guidelines which can come up. So follow standard hospital procedures whichever are there for thawing plasma once the plasma is issued from the blood bank for the patient. It is very critical to ensure ABO compatibility between the donor and avoidance of RH desensitization if there is whole blood transfusion. So it is must that ABO compatibility. Transfusion of plasma from at least 2 donors will achieve therapeutic benefit better because different individuals may have different types of antibodies. So suppose I'm a donor, my antibody response may be different. Another individual is, and these are all polyclonal type of antibodies. They will have different epitopes, means those different domains and all those antigen binding sites. So every antibody may be different. My antibody, even though all are human antibodies, my antibody, it may differ from one individual to other also because these are polyclonal type of antibodies. So depending on the clone which is producing antibodies, it will differ. So it's better that 2 different, rather than giving from one donor, you can give it from 2 donors, the 2 doses. So initial dose of 200 ml and additional dose of another 200 ml can be given. And any further scientific investigation, it is always better that patients are monitored. So now there are various different trials, as I told you, and there are again lots of debates, lots of different mixed results which are coming from different trials. So basically convalescent plasma is used in attempt to improve the clinical disease or the clinical course of that particular disease in the individual. And that's why the evolving consensus is that it should be earlier part of in the earlier part of the disease, this plasma should be transfused. This is an area of active investigation and lots of clinical trials still need to be performed on that. So because the viremia usually peaks in the first week of infection. So if the plasma is given in first 7 days, and there will be later on there will be immune response. So that active virus which is still there is viremia, that time if plasma is given, it can neutralize that particular viruses inside the body. So early transfusion will definitely help. So other therapies also can be given, but at the same time it should not happen that one particular treatment modality is whether it is working or not, you are still awaiting the results. You should hold on convalescent plasma and the other way around also. So because convalescent plasma, you are awaiting the benefits, other treatment should not be. It should be finally the patient benefit. So optimum dose we already discussed. Pediatric dose can be per kg body weight, whatever. And otherwise 1 or 2 units of 200 to maximum 250 ml. Pre-medications. This is like transfusing plasma, like it is like transfusing FFP, fresh frozen plasma. So some individuals who are, or some patients who develop allergic or non-hemolytic transfusion reactions, clinicians give antihistaminics or acetaminophen before they begin transfusion. But actually there are no, it is not considered really whether they're really effective or efficacious. So, and they may sometimes cause adverse effects also. But who have really developed very severe allergies or serious high-grade fevers earlier, then such individuals who have the history, then such individuals can be pre-medicated. Otherwise, there is no indication for pre-medication. But of course, monitoring needs to be performed as always when in any case of transfusion. And even clinical and laboratory monitoring is always better. Now, what are the adverse reactions to plasma transfusion? Plasma, this is like finally, like any other plasma, like fresh frozen plasma. When we transfuse, whatever reactions are there, same way, because it is finally a plasma. Only thing, it contains COVID antibodies, fresh frozen plasma doesn't. Otherwise, the composition is same. So whatever reactions are there for FFP, same reactions can occur in a patient. For example, transmission of infections, allergic reactions to those plasma proteins, hemolysis, if it is containing some other abnormal antibody, transfusion-associated circulatory overload because you are loading the patient with plasma recipient, and transfusion-related acute lung injury where lung is affected, and that is why nulliparous women are usually preferred to prevent. This is one of the serious complication which is very, very underreported. Many times it is ignored. If an individual develops TRALI, many clinicians may not know that it is associated with transfusion, some lung involvement. But plasma is the one which is associated with TRALI. Plasma components which were contain red cells usually do not cause this. But plasma is the one, and multiparous women who are exposed to fetal antigens when they were carrying, they are exposed to fetal antigens which have come from the father, means the husband, and those they will develop anti-HLA antibodies or anti-neutrophilic antibodies, and they are there in those multiparous women's blood. So it is similar to hemolytic disease of newborn where they develop antibodies to Rh of baby and the baby will get hemolysis, hemolytic disease. So same way the mother will, those multiparous women can have those antibodies, and those antibodies when they are transfused to recipient, they can cause this acute lung injury because they are anti-neutrophilic antibodies and anti-HLA antibodies. That's why multiparous women are deferred. They are not taken for plasma donation even if they had COVID. Only nulliparous women and males are taken. This is this on the right side. There is this lung involvement. Just to show you, this is not exactly the part of this topic because this can happen with FFP transfusion also. You can see those lung infiltrates bilateral, that is involvement of lungs after transfusion. Another one serious reaction which has been postulated is antibody dependent enhancement. Means sometimes these antibodies can paradoxically increase viral uptake by cells, and that can even worsen the disease. It has not been reported with COVID plasma up till now. So many transfusions have taken place all over the world, but this has just been postulated because sometimes these antibodies can worsen. That is one like postulate, and it can. That's why the clinical trials should monitor this particular ADE also. So that's why monitoring for this ADE, that is antibody dependent enhancement of that virus uptake, in fact, which is really means if you are trying to save life of a patient, this should not happen. Luckily up till now no such reaction has been reported, but at the same time the monitoring is really a challenge because it's a clinical phenomenon and there are no specific laboratory tests for it. So it is very important that monitor the patient properly, that there is no worsening of the condition. Another thing is there may be interference with vaccination. Now vaccine has not yet come, but still it may interfere. It may interfere with the person's own natural immune system. Once he gets vaccine, then his own immune system may be suppressed, because that is again one more like hypothesis that it may happen. So now our experience with COVID plasma therapy is that we have been involved in 2 clinical trials. So one was ICMR trial for moderate disease, that is called PLACID trial, and another is Government of Maharashtra trial for severe disease. Out of this PLACID trial is already over, and ICMR is analyzing all the reports. Both these are multicentric trials. And unfortunately, we could enroll only one patient in this PLACID trial. That was, and the trial it was halted at the end of it. Basically, maybe because in KEM, our hospital, majority of the patients were from severe disease. Like majority of that time, now it is still reduced. That time 95% were with severe disease and remaining 5% were with moderate disease. In that moderate disease also fulfilling the criteria required for trial. So again, there were lesser number of percentage. So we could not really, and then again, patient should give consent. That was for next thing. That's why we could enroll only one patient and she is doing very well. Another is Government of Maharashtra trial for severe disease, that is Platina, which we have just got ethical approval from our institute. We are in the process, just maybe by Monday we should get approval from ethics and we will start. We have plasma is there with us. We will, we can use it for the patient. So there were specific objectives of this trial, efficacy. They basically wanted to assess efficacy of the plasma, and at the same time it should be safe also. It should not happen that it is efficacious but causing adverse reactions in the patient. That should not happen. So there were specific efficacy objective and safety objectives which have been very clearly stated what they want to achieve, what they want to, these trials want to study. And these were the inclusion criteria which were given. Who all can enroll. These were the criteria. If the person fulfills those criteria, then he can be enrolled in the study. And that also, this is a randomized control type of trial. So some people, maybe some patients can get enrolled in control arm and other in treatment arm. And severe disease also, similar criteria have been, objectives have been laid down. Sorry. So these are the criteria for severe. So as per the severe disorder criteria. So now other trials. So now available evidence is really very limited, and now more randomized trials are actually needed. What has happened is that there are many trials, there are observation trials, but one cannot do any meta-analysis out of those trials which are available. So ideally they should be randomized control trials. But problem with randomized control trials, randomized means there is one control group and there is patient group, means the treatment group, and both of them are fulfilling the criteria, whatever are there for severe disease and moderate disease. So control arm will receive only standard treatment, and treatment arm will receive standard treatment, whatever antivirals or whatever is being given, otherwise plus plasma. That will be the treatment arm. And control arm will be only the standard treatment whichever is being given. But there are problems with that because randomized control trials take long time. By that time the pandemic will get over, most probably. We are hoping for that. And another thing is ethical issues, because clinicians, they don't want their patients to be deprived of the treatment. If it is really indicated that plasma is indicated for this patient also and this patient also, both are having severe disease or both are having moderate disease, that particular group of patients should be deprived. So ethically, they really do not feel nice that somebody should receive only standard treatment when plasma treatment is available, which is not really going to cause any harm at least to the patient. So that's why observational studies also are recommended rather than randomized control, because that may be difficult to achieve that goal. Now ICMR trial is over. Let us see. We are waiting for the results. So one of the first randomized clinical trial obviously came from China. That it was published in Journal of American Medical Association. But he did not observe any statistically significant benefit in the clinical improvement or mortality. But it provided important signal for possible benefit of certain, because high titer antibodies may be really beneficial and antiviral therapy. But there were some study limitations because by that time they could not enroll many patients in the study, because by that time the virus disappeared from Wuhan. Suddenly, abruptly disappeared, and that's why they could not enroll any more patients in the study. But it has definitely given inspiration to more future studies. Then another study, I will just briefly go through it. There was a review of 5 studies, one article where they had studied viral load, antibody titers, and they got very promising results out of it, that it reduces viral load. Plasma therapy reduces viral load in the patient and increases the levels of neutralizing antibodies. And titers also went up, this particular study has shown. Clinical benefits also were achieved. ARDS was resolved in many patients. Lung lesions were absorbed. So those 5 studies have overall given very promising results. So then about doses, and when to give the treatment, 200 ml or an early therapy, early plasma transfusions will always help. So these 5 studies have been like the study of each results of each study have been given under dose, under whether it resolved the symptoms, whether it reduced viral load. Under all these titles, they got promising results. Survival also was good in all these 5 studies after plasma transfusion. Do we consider other options apart from plasma? So what could be the problems with this plasma therapy? One problem is that it is obviously from human individual, there are chances of reaction. And we don't know how much antibodies are there in that particular, we test, but again, titers are not available everywhere. Neutralizing antibodies are being done only in Pune and NIV Pune. So another option, as I told you earlier, like how we consider cryoprecipitate versus factor 8 for hemophilia treatment. So same way, something which is concentrated. So we can give hyperimmune globulins, which are antibodies only against COVID in a concentrated form. That is another option. But it is still being developed. It can be used as a single dose, just one intramuscular injection. And it has still under trial because COVID again is new thing, still vaccine is being developed the same way. Hyperimmune globulin is not yet come up. And the advantages of this, potential advantages can be, because it is same way, it can be pathogen reduced. It can undergo some treatment, chemical treatments, and pathogens can be destroyed from that hyperimmune globulin so that it is safe for use. It is lower volume, so it does not cause volume overload in the individual. When you are giving 200 ml of plasma, it can result in volume overload. It is concentrated, so high titers of antibodies, low risk of transfusion reaction because it is very small. That's why this is one very promising option. And what will be the disadvantages of this hyperimmune globulin? Obviously, the cost factor. It is going to be very, very costly, probably beyond our affordability for our country. But and large number of plasma units. So many plasma units, and you will get only this much hyperimmune globulin, which is going to be very safe. But so many plasma units will be required. Rather than that, give those plasma units only individually to patients. So now what can be further questions in this? There are still many questions which remain unanswered, or there is no answer from those whatever clinical trials, or there are mixed results or controversial results which are, or one study gives result, other study gives exactly opposite results. That also can happen. So what is optimum timing for transfusion? Majority of the studies say that it is early, within 7 days when the viremia is at peak, and obviously before 14 days. How long after clinical resolution is there a chance to obtain neutralization antibodies? What is the most effective frequency of administration of convalescent plasma? How frequently and how many doses? Is clinical therapeutic effect related to antibody titer really, when we want to say that we want to perform titers, but it is really whether that effect is dependent on antibody titer? Benefit in children and pregnant, because whatever studies we are performing, those clinical trials, ICMR, pregnant women and young children are not supposed to be included in those trials. So we don't know about the results in them. Does neutralization titer correlate with the in vivo potency, whether it is really useful? Titer we are done in vitro, it is useful, but whether it will be really useful inside the body. And convalescent plasma therapies done in emergency situations. So many times other treatments also are being done even. So whether really plasma is effective or the patient would have recovered because of other treatments which are there. So confounding factors are always there because we cannot give only plasma and just see the effect. There are other treatments we need to give. So we don't know. And challenges of maintaining supply. So risk of COVID-19 infections are profound, and potential effective therapy for treatment. And there is definitely evidence has been gathered, but still more important and more well-controlled clinical trials, if they come up, really we will be definitely confidently progress in this particular area, and we will help out patients. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Once again, I thank all of you. and it was really very nice to have interaction earlier before the lecture and now after this.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
Yeah,
for the
and I
great
would like
presentation.
to have your feedback also. Feedback in the sense your experience, if you share with me, because my experience, as I told you, is really limited to clinical trials. So I may not know beyond those legal and other regulatory which are coming up now, recent guidelines and all those. You can like add on to that. It will be really wonderful if if you share that with me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for a great presentation. Most of us are actually OPD-based practitioners.
Okay.
I think Nirmal, if he has got any experience, he can share it with us. Nirmal, do you have any experience with this?
We have recently, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Plasma therapy is very new for Dombivli per se. What problem we as a doctor face while prescribing any medication, especially in this COVID scenario, is first the trust of the patient, which is at bottom, which has bottomed out like anything. Even if you tell them that they are COVID, they first say that you are duping. Second important thing is there has to be some validation or some competent or a trustworthy or a reputed, respected authority like ICMR or IMA has to come with a position paper about at least the timing at which the plasma can be initiated, plasma therapy can be initiated. Because whenever we counsel the patients and the relatives regarding this therapy, if we say that plasma therapy has to be given at an earlier stage, frankly, most of the patients don't have symptoms severe enough for them to accept that they need a plasma therapy. And there is no predictive score per se in the current clinical scenario which can predict that after 7 days or after 10 days, this XYZ person would go into a cytokine storm or a cytokine surge, which would have been initially prevented by the plasma therapy. So two things from practical point of view to encourage the use of plasma would be number one, validation of the optimal timing to start the plasma therapy. And the other thing which I said, that some predictive score which will help us understand or at least medico-legally put on paper that this person was given plasma for XYZ reason.
Very true. Let us now, hopefully, let us wait for the ICMR results then, because it is long awaited actually. The results should have come out. So let us see whether we can get any concrete answer and which will help you out. And really, it is very challenging to convince patients and predict whatever is going to happen in them. It is really challenging.
Yeah, because usually in first 7 days, most of the patients don't have any significant symptoms. So probably I think the thing would be we have to select the high-risk patients and sensitize them that probably because of your comorbidities, you may deteriorate and you may require plasma. Because after listening to your talk, predominantly what I feel is that if we give plasma at the earlier stage, only then it will be mostly useful.
Yes.
It won't be useful after, they say, day 10, day 14. And 90% patients coming to the hospital are in the cytokine storm stage. Yeah.
That is
our practical problem.
Yeah, that is not possible then.
I have got a question here. I've got a doubt. See, even if the viremia load is low, the patient can develop cytokine storm, isn't it? It depends on his immune response to the viral infection.
Yes.
So, if the patient's viral load is less, but cytokine storm happens, will he be benefited from the plasma therapy?
Basically, the cytokines. Yes, sir. Yeah.
No, madam, you continue. I will just speak after you.
No. Whatever I want to comment is that probably the cytokine storm is related to viral replication. But as madam has said that even if viral load is less, so still probably I think it should help, because it will finally neutralize whatever viruses are replicating. It stops on viral viral replication is stopped because of plasma therapy. So,
but it doesn't help in cytokine storm, right? Plasma therapy as a
probably not. That I really cannot
may I
answer
come in?
that.
May
Yeah,
I come in?
yes.
There is clinically no way to actually understand the viral load. What I have seen till now, basically what we see is how the patient is responding clinically or progressing clinically. There is no single clinical test by which we can say on say day 4 or day 7 that this patient just if we take example of HIV or HCV or hepatitis B virus, what we do is a viral load which to a great extent guides our treatment. But in COVID, this concept is not there. Many people have said ki if the infection is acquired in the hospital, probably the viral load is high, and if it is acquired in the community, it will be low. But clinically, there is no way, according to me, where you can determine whether the person is having disease because of a high viral load or low viral load. Mostly, these are what I can say a bit of guesswork and some probably some experimental centers, some high-end centers would be doing viral load. No idea about it, but mostly in India, I have not heard a center which is doing viral load of COVID. So in clinical picture, I don't think it will make any difference or it will make any impact because we don't have any experience with viral load numbers.
And my second question is, can plasma therapy help in decreasing the lung injury because of the pneumonia?
Yes, the results are that it causes, whatever studies have been done up till now, it has caused resolution of ARDS and even lung involvement. Whatever I presented, there were some studies, 5 studies which have shown that result. Sir can probably focus on that.
Pardon?
See, pneumonia, there is a viral load in the lung. So if you give plasma therapy, will it decrease the pneumonia infection?
If you see the whole how the COVID progresses or proceeds now, usually which patients we get now, usually we get first set of patients in 4th, 5th day of their disease, where they just have fever, body ache, headache, all these things. And second set of patients come to us by say 10th or 14th day. Okay. Now it is really not known that degree of lung involvement, will it be dependent on the viral load or the immune response or the quality of immune response? Again, as I said, throughout our practice for past three months, I think Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Madam, our renowned microbiologist, would like to add, she had put an update on chat that we don't have any experience with viral load because we have not done it, we have not seen it. We are managing patients based only on clinical parameters, interleukin levels, D-dimers, ferritin, and in our clinical practice or in other papers also, we have not seen any correlation between viral load and these markers. The correlation would be in the markers and the clinical outcome. So I am really not the authority to speak on viral load. Probably Vijay Lakshmi Madam would be able to put some light on that.
Okay. Yeah, this is Dr. Vijay Lakshmi here. I am the microbiologist and practicing in Dombivli. Regarding the testing part, I have already tried to create awareness on our WhatsApp groups of IMA Dombivli. So currently the PCR kit, the SARS-CoV-2 PCR kit, the RT-PCR, which is done commonly, it is a qualitative kit, which means it just detects or not detects the virus. Quantitative kits or the viral load kits are not available in market, or I mean to say ICMR has nowhere put in their strategies for doing the viral load or for testing or for reporting as a commercial use. For research base, if some hospital is doing research, there might be some viral load kits available, but as per my knowledge, no viral load kits are available for testing. The second aspect, which the thing is, there is something lot of. I just take this opportunity to clarify things. The CT value is considered as a marker for indirect way to detect viral load, which is absolutely wrong. So let's not mix CT value and viral load. It has nothing to do with the viral load prediction. So these are the two things I would like to tell. And I hope in future we might have viral load detection kits also, which might help in therapies and also in the critical patients who may have high viral load for a longer time. So I think that's what I would like to add. I think I must have solved your queries also. Is that fine, Nirmal?
But
Yes, ma'am, yes,
RT-PCR level suggests a viral load in the nasal mucosa or upper respiratory tract. It doesn't suggest a lower respiratory tract or a blood viral load, right?
No, ICMR has given approvals only for the upper respiratory tract samples. The kit validation for this qualitative PCRs, which we are doing, it may be RT-PCR, it may be CBNAT PCR, or any rapid antigen test also. The kits validation is done only and only for upper respiratory samples or respiratory samples. There is no way, there is no validation given for other samples.
So if high RT-PCR load is there, that doesn't mean that the patient might go into, cytokine storm or become serious, because it again is the upper respiratory tract viral load.
I think there are two different aspects to this question. One is the viral load and second is the immune response of the patient.
You cannot say whether the patient will become serious even if you have a high RT-PCR.
Yes, high viral load. So we don't know viral load because we don't have the kit to measure a viral load right now.
But still, there is no correlation between the load and the severity of the
high viral load means your cytokine storm will be a bigger storm. And also it depends upon the individual genetic makeup for this.
Genetics, yeah.
So if you have seen, there's a huge variability of immune response which we are getting. There may be comorbid patients who are getting treated at home, and there are absolutely healthy patients who are landing up on ventilator. So there's a big means like.
You cannot predict.
But I cannot comment on this. We are yet to understand this virus, all of us.
Yeah. Anyone has questions?
Questions have been typed.
Okay.
Madam,
there is a question of Dr. Sheetal has asked, one of my known patient has given plasma at Dombivli and the lesions have increased in spite of 2 doses. Anyone can comment on that, please?
Again, madam, the most important thing will be what was the time of plasma given. And second thing is, again and again, like we speak about tocilizumab or we speak about most of the therapies, what has proven to benefit, according to me and most of the clinicians will agree, what has proven to benefit in COVID is number 1, but obvious oxygen, number 2, low molecular weight heparins, and number 3 are steroids. Other than that, whatever we are using, they are all experimental therapies. People get a dose or 2 of tocilizumab in cytokine storm, still they deteriorate. The same is the thing with plasma, especially when you don't know at what time it was given, whether it was given in the first 7 days or in the later stage. According to me, it will be very, very, very difficult to convince any person to take plasma in first 7 days. The way things are going currently, they will not take it. Because in first 7 days, people hardly have any symptoms, hardly.
Yes, I agree with you, Dr. Nirmal. Anyone else has any questions?
I have a question, Dr. Vijayalakshmi here. As Dr. Swarupa has also said, the time of the plasma therapy is important. Dr. Nirmal has also elaborated on it. So, are there any SOPs or standard guidelines for the timing from ICMR?
There are no, it was part of clinical trials. So now we are actually awaiting the results of that trial. So let us see because they will analyze all this data when that particular plasma was given to a patient in all these multicentric study, and let us hope that they will soon come up with some guidelines, ICMR results.
because we have just today only launched our plasma donation.
Yeah.
Initiative.
Yes,
So I just thought it would help our team and there are many
definitely. But
clinicians
many,
who want to send patients for plasma therapy. That is the reason I asked this question.
Yes, many other studies have shown that early infusion of plasma is beneficial, but still, let us see now what ICMR says from this. These multicentric trials, obviously, it will be more authentic and results should come out now.
I think there's one more question in the chat box also regarding apheresis. How are all blood blanks the apheresis facility is there as per the standard guidelines in Mumbai, at least for us?
In Mumbai, at least here in majority of the blood banks are having, and they are predominantly using it for platelet pheresis. Very small blood banks, they may not have, those who don't have component separation, but even standalone, and majority of the blood banks are having apheresis, especially for platelets. Mainly whatever is done in India is currently platelet pheresis only. And now this plasma pheresis has come up. Some blood banks will definitely not have it. It will not be 100%. But that facility is available in major cities mainly. So that's why we were considering that plasma obtained from whole blood donation also, which because the apheresis facility may not be available in smaller centers or outside bigger cities, smaller cities, it may not be available.
So means currently our doctors, if they want to send patients for plasma therapy, so minimum requirement right now should be like above 28 days. That is the main requirement.
Yes.
And that those patients will be screened first for the antibody titer, and then only the plasma will be accepted. That is
yes. Antibodies will be checked in them with the presence of antibodies, IgG titers, and then they will be presence of IgG to COVID. And then they will be taken, and apart from other tests.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Swarupa, for a great presentation and clarifying our doubts. I thank our moderators, Dr. Nirmal Thakur and Dr. Aparna, on behalf of IMA Dombivli Scientific Committee. Thank you all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our renowned speaker, Dr. Swarupa Bhagwat. And it has cleared a lot of
I have a question.
And it has cleared lots of doubts in our minds. And Dr. Aparna, Dr. Nirmal Das, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi has also.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Dr. Sheetal, you want to ask something? Yes, please. Please ask, Dr. Sheetal.
Yes. I wanted to ask whether if a person donates plasma, what will happen to his antibody titer and whether he will be exposed to the infection more, whether his antibody titers drop because of donation.
No, we are, madam, actually we are taking only 500 ml of plasma from his body.
If a person donates plasma,
yes,
after getting the infection and being tested negative,
yes. So he donates plasma after 28 days.
So will he have the antibody titer? Will his antibody titer drop?
Oh yeah,
no,
actually,
so will his in that case.
There are no studies, madam, as we have that it is still ongoing. Many of the things, and it has not been studied. But we are collecting only 500 ml of plasma from his body. So there should be no reason. Like it is like blood donation only, like where we give 350 ml of blood and doesn't.
Is the antibody?
There is no reason, madam, it should go down because of the smaller volume of plasma which we are taking.
For the antibody
it is not yet checked. Not checked. It is not checked. It is not being done.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there's one more question by Dr. Sangeeta Dandekar. How much titer is required for accepting the donation? I think this question was taken before.
This was actually, there are two things here actually. There are, as per FDA, there are titers required because currently FDA has approved the use of this plasma for clinical trials for which titers are not required. It is not a prerequisite before plasma is given to a patient, titer should be done. It is because it is just a trial drug, considering a trial drug or new investigational drug. It is FDA has permitted to use it on patients before titers are being performed. We just check for IgG, presence of IgG antibodies in them. So that is one group of patients or one category. And then we later on, as a part of trial, because they want to compile data like for ICMR or now Government of Maharashtra, they want to compile data later and analyze it. We will be sending those samples to NIV Pune, and we will be getting the titers done of neutralizing antibodies. Another thing is that there is this titer criteria where 1 in 640 of that RBD antibodies, which is considered off-label use of plasma, 1 in 640 that FDA has given that particular titer of minimum that much titer should be there. But there are no labs or these titration studies are not available and they are not being standardized because majority of these ELISA, they just give OD values. There is no titration, and those values which we get on ELISA, those are not, they don't correlate actually with the titers. So that problem everyone is facing actually, but we are in clinical trials, so we are not doing any titers. So 1 in 640 is for the off-label use of titers.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Thank you for telling us that. Yes.
There was one more question from Dr. Kuchekar, sir. Quantitative IgMs are not done anywhere in India now?
Titer is not being done. Quantitative means as such titer is not being done. Quantitative, that's why. And IgG, it is mainly IgG1 which is required. IgG titer should be there. In fact, if IgM is there, that donor should not donate plasma because that indicates that it is still having recent infection or active infection. So IgG titers are the ones which are required for COVID, and they are currently not being done, and a lot of debate is going on. That's why everyone is like how to give that plasma out of clinical trials. That is the question everyone is facing.
One more question from Dr. Sangeeta Dandekar, madam. Titers given by private labs are validated.
I don't know whether any of the private labs are giving titers of antibodies, IgG antibodies. I think Dr. Vijayalakshmi will be able to help out in this more because I have not heard that any private lab is giving titers. It just shows the OD value. Even the ICMR kits which are where IgG is being done by ELISA, it gives OD value only. But I think Dr. Vijayalakshmi will be a better person to answer.
Titers are, this is Dr. Vijayalakshmi here. Titers are not given. But recently, Biomiro is the company, the kit is just got approval from ICMR. I think maybe in next 1 or 2 weeks, IgM, IgG titers might be available. It is a quantitative, not titer. This is a quantitative assay which is available by Biomiro.
Okay.
That is great. That's a great news then.
It's latest kit which has got approval, and I think it might take a week or maybe more for its implementation everywhere in the private labs.
Okay, that is a great information actually. Thank you.
Thank you all once again. Yes, anyone has questions?
Yeah, are the lung lesions because of the virus or it is a reaction to the virus? Because we were talking of viral load in the upper respiratory tract or because we don't check the lower respiratory tract. So are the lung lesions because of the virus itself or as a reaction to the virus?
Dr. Nirmal, can you please answer that question?
Lung lesions are because of the virus to start with, but they worsen because of the immunity. That is, if you see the CT scan in the initial phases, say 4th, 5th, 6th day, you will find subtle lung lesions at 20–30%. Okay. Has not been proven, but it is a theory that the lung lesion starts worsening because of the immunity. So to start with, the lung lesions are because of the virus, but the worsening of lung lesions is because of the immunity in the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful session. Yes.
Thank you very much for this session and contribution and interaction with everyone. Thanks once again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, madam. Bye.
Thank you.